In order to explain Marnus Labuschagne, I think we need to at least remember Mike Hussey, because he was another player who came into Test cricket and just blitzed everyone. But even just a look at this shows you that they are not similar patterns. Labuschagne's pattern is different in almost every way. Marnus Labuschagne has been as difficult for Test bowlers as his name once was to say, or even spell, for most Australians. But his entire career has been so bizarre. Since entering Test cricket, Marnus has only been the second best batter in Tests. Only Kane Williamson has a higher average. And he entered 2018 as Kane Williamson, one of the Fab Four. Labuschagne entered Tests with a first-class average of 36.4. His average in Tests itself is 60.6. Players sometimes get honeymoon periods in Tests. They play a bunch of games at home, or they come into the side in their mid-20s, completely sure of how to score red ball runs. Labuschagne did none of those things. He hadn't made first-class runs. He was 24 when he made his debut, and his run of good form started in England, in a tough series to make runs. This isn't the normal bump, or as we might call it, the Mike Hussey peak. There's a lot of nonsense spoken about Hussey's career. It's often said that he was knocking on the door of the Australian team for a long time. He wasn't. In fact, he was dropped by Western Australia. But what is true is that after 18 Tests, he was averaging 86. It's a remarkable effort to keep your average that high for that many matches, especially in the beginning of your career. But players do sometimes get this bounce when they come in late. While it's rare for players to average more in Tests than first-class cricket, it probably happens more than you think. And that's because first-class cricket is played on tougher 4-day wickets. The facilities aren't as good, and you often start very young. If you're a quality Test batter and you get chosen in your peak years, you often have a good run. And then usually you're dropped at the first sign of weakness. So your average ends up quite good. But Labuschagne is not like Hussey, who was a seasoned veteran who knew his game when he was picked for Test match cricket. Labuschagne was a bit like Steve Smith or Marcus North or Cameron White. Australia selected him at first because he could bowl a little bit. And Labuschagne didn't hit the ground running either. It was not really until he went to Glamorgan that things changed. You can read about how Labuschagne went from a struggling first-class player to a Test star in the great Dan Breddick piece. But while a lot of things were different, one of the most obvious was what happened when he got to Glamorgan. At that point, Labuschagne had 2 Tests and 3 first-class hundreds. He made 4 more hundreds in that one season, and he only played 10 games. But it's really the consistency that changed. He made runs all the time. Look at this bit here where no one could get him out for under 50 runs. The other weird thing is that Labuschagne went back to Glamorgan this year, and he made no runs across 6 games. It was like the whole thing was a glitch. And yet, we know it has stayed true ever since. The weirdest thing about all the runs that Labuschagne has made at Test level is that it's come when no one else has made any runs. The year he arrived was 2018. That was the lowest modern year by average, the beginning of the pace-playing pandemic. And since then, it has remained very tough. But let's look at batters in the top 3. Since his debut, as a group, they have averaged a dire 33. Labuschagne is nearly double that. He's worth 2 average top-order players. And that's just not right. And it should be pointed out that a huge amount of his runs come at home. He has played 6 Tests when touring, but 13 at home. And he has made a comical amount of runs there. I mean, this is a lot of runs, innings after innings. A bit like Akshar Patel or Kyle Jameson. You have to take into account that it's a short career played mostly in favourable conditions at home. But lots of players have played at home since 2018, and no one else has 1,500 runs, and only a few have a higher average than Marnus. And it's clear that he hasn't been as good away compared to home, but he's still averaging 39 away from home. It may look terrible compared to his home record, but averaging over 35 anywhere at the moment is pretty good. And when you compare him to other batters, it does start to put his overall record more into perspective. However, it's also worth saying that 2 of his 6 Tests he played away were actually before his transformation. But we still don't know how he will go in Asia, South Africa, or against the Dukes and West Indies. One thing worth pointing out is that batting in Australia has been tougher than usual. Easier than places like South Africa and the West Indies, but still rough. Whereas Williamson has batted in New Zealand, which is like a protected sanctuary for batters compared to most nations. And you can see that along with Kane Williamson at the top, on the other side of Labuschagne is Steve Smith. That's who he based himself on. And yet somehow he has outscored the original model. In fact, in the last 2 years, he's been massively ahead of Smith, and also everyone else in cricket. He's just been the best batter in the world. And this might be a weird short sample size of home games and him feeling really confident, but it's happened. And he might start to make, well, in his own words,
no run! No run! No run! No run!
But at the moment, Marnus Labuschagne has made a lot of runs to start his Test career. He's one of the best rookies we've ever had, and he just keeps getting better. And this isn't a short period. He's been scoring these runs for over 4 years now, when no one else has. At home and even a few away. It's remarkable. I am sure that this will eventually regress to the mean, like it did for Hussey around 20 tests. But for now, it's just a lot of runs, and it feels very rare, and when he does fail, it feels more like a surprise.
No run! No run! No run!